For decades, the Sepang International Circuit has been more than just a racetrack. It is a humid, unforgiving cathedral of speed where legends are measured and pretenders are exposed. And for years, one name stood above the heat haze etched into the asphalt itself: Marc Marquez. His lap record wasn't just a number on a timing screen, it was a psychological barrier. It was the gold standard of what was humanly possible on two wheels. Every veteran in the paddock believed that record was safe, protected by a wall of technical complexity that no newcomer could ever hope to climb. But in the early hours of the 2026 preseason shakedown, the air in Malaysia felt different. There was no fanfare, no flashing lights, no media circus, just the raw, guttural scream of a brand new engine configuration echoing off the grandstands. While the world's cameras were focused on the established champions in their air-conditioned trailers, a quiet revolution was unfolding on the track. A newcomer, a rider most experts said would need years to adapt to the brutal physics of a prototype, was lining up his sights on that untouchable ghost. What happened next didn't just break a record, it shattered the status quo. By the time the sun began to set over the paddock, the telemetry didn't just show a fast lap, it showed the end of an era. The dominance of the old guard was under threat, and the culprit was a man who had barely finished his first few hours on the bike. No one inside the paddock expected what would unfold next, and it would change everything for him, his team, and the entire 2026 season. Behind the calm, focused expression of Toprak Razgatlioglu, a storm was brewing. For years, the Stoprak King had dominated the world superbike stage, but the MotoGP paddock is a different world, a world of billion-dollar prototypes and carbon fiber secrets. Many purists dismissed him. They claimed his aggressive, late-breaking style was too wild for the delicate electronics of a MotoGP machine. They said he was a specialist in a production-based world, who would be eaten alive by the precision of Grand Prix racing. But Toprak didn't come to MotoGP to learn, he came to conquer. The move to Yamaha for 2026 was the biggest gamble of his career. He wasn't just joining a team, he was joining a brand in the midst of a desperate technical identity crisis. Yamaha had finally done the unthinkable. They had abandoned their traditional inline-4 engine architecture for a radical new V4 power unit. It was a project born of necessity, fueled by the fear of being left behind by the European giants. Inside the Yamaha garage, the atmosphere was thick with tension. If this V4 project failed, it wouldn't just be a bad season, it would be the end of Yamaha's MotoGP legacy. The stakes were astronomical. Toprak was stepping into the most high-pressure development cycle in the sport's history. Yet as he put on his helmet for the first session, there was no sign of nerves, only a chilling, singular focus. According to some insiders, the telemetry from his very first outlap already showed a braking pressure that defied Yamaha's computer simulations. And yet, this was only the beginning of a far bigger storm. While the heavyweights from Ducati and KTM were busy sandbagging, hiding their true performance to avoid showing their hand, Toprak was engaged in a different game. He wasn't looking at the other riders, he was reading the bike. The 2026 shakedown was supposed to be a period of data collection, a slow handshake between rider and machine. But Toprak doesn't do slow. He began to probe the limits of the Sepang circuit with a violence that left observers breathless. His riding style was illogical. He would dive into the tight hairpins of sectors 1 and 2 with the rear wheel hovering inches off the ground, a signature move that had many mechanics holding their breath. But the bike wasn't protesting, it was responding. The new V4 engine provided a level of torque and stability that allowed him to manipulate the laws of physics in ways his predecessors never could. Then it happened. Without a qualifying tire, without a full time attack setup, and without any warning, the timing screens turned a deep, bruised purple. The paddock went silent. Sector by sector, Toprak was clawing back time against the immortal benchmark set by Marc Marquez years prior. He wasn't just fast, he was executing a surgical strike on history. But what the paddock discovered next shocked everyone. When the clock stopped, the numbers were staggering. Toprak Razgatlioglu had eclipsed Marquez's record, but it wasn't just the time that sent shockwaves through the pit lane, it was the way he did it. There was no grand celebration, no fist pumping, no wheelies across the finish line. Toprak rolled back into the pits, took off his gloves, and calmly began discussing front-end stability with his crew chief. This wasn't the behavior of a rookie who had just achieved a career-defining moment. This was the behavior of a hunter who knew the job wasn't finished. Rival teams began to scramble. Telemetry data from across the paddock was being analyzed at light speed. How could a rider with zero MotoGP experience break a record on a bike that was still considered experimental? The technical analysis revealed a frightening truth. The Yamaha V4's new aerodynamic package, combined with Toprak's ability to V-shape the corners, meant he was spending less time on the edge of the tire and more time utilizing the raw horsepower of the new engine. He had found a loophole in the physics of Sepang. Rumors suggested that even the Ducati engineers, usually the most confident in the paddock, were seen huddled in deep discussion outside their garage. However, the twist that followed would change the championship narrative entirely. Just as the focus was entirely on Toprak, the second half of the Yamaha garage roared to life. Jack Miller, the thriller himself, wasn't about to let a newcomer steal the entire spotlight. Miller had been brought into the Yamaha project for one reason: his legendary ability to develop a bike from the ground up. Having ridden for nearly every major manufacturer, Miller brought a library of technical knowledge that Toprak lacked. The dynamic between the two was electric. You had Toprak's raw, instinctive speed clashing with Miller's brutal, analytical feedback. Miller wasn't just there to be a mentor, he was there to win. On day 2 of the shakedown, Miller went on the offensive. He exploited the Yamaha V4's new rear traction to its absolute limit, showing that the bike wasn't just a one-lap wonder in the hands of a specialist. Miller topped the timesheets, momentarily eclipsing Toprak's consistency and proving that the Yamaha V4 was a legitimate weapon. The Australian catalyst had turned a development test into a civil war. For the first time in 5 years, Yamaha had two riders who were pushing each other toward a cliff edge of performance. The internal tension was palpable. Some mechanics claimed that the feedback coming from both sides of the garage was so intense that the engineers were struggling to keep up with the demands. Yet, the real turning point happened away from the cameras. The data didn't lie. Yamaha had finally fixed the one thing that had plagued them for half a decade: performance degradation. In long-run simulations, both Miller and Toprak were maintaining lap times that would have won races the previous season. The V4 engine wasn't just powerful, it was efficient. It treated its tires with a respect the old inline-4 never could. But there was a darker side to this success. The V4 revolution had created a power vacuum in the paddock. The European manufacturers who had enjoyed a period of utter dominance were suddenly looking over their shoulders. The psychological pressure was shifting. The media, once critical of Yamaha's outdated philosophy, was now hailing them as the new masters of innovation. Technical disputes began to surface. Rival teams started questioning the legality of Yamaha's new aero winglets and their sophisticated engine braking software. Speculation emerged that Yamaha had found a disputed advantage in the way their electronics managed torque delivery. But while the lawyers and team principals argued in the offices, Toprak and Miller remained focused on the asphalt. They knew that no amount of paddock politics could take away what they had felt on the track. What happened after that left even his closest team members stunned. As the Sepang Shakedown came to a close, the final results painted a chilling picture for the rest of the grid. Toprak Razgatlioglu and Jack Miller hadn't just tested a bike, they had issued a declaration of war. The untouchable record of Marc Marquez was now a footnote in history, a relic of an era that ended the moment Toprak's V4 screamed across the line. The 2026 season hadn't even officially begun, but the hierarchy was dead. The power landscape had shifted from the red of Bologna to the blue of Iwata. But there was one final piece of information that leaked out of the Yamaha garage on the final night, a piece of news that sent a shiver through every rival camp. Insiders claimed that the record-breaking lap set by Toprak was achieved using a conservative engine map. The bike was running at 85% of its true potential. Yamaha was holding back. They were sandbagging in the most terrifying way possible by breaking records while still in safe mode. Toprak Razgatlioglu entered the 2026 season not as a rookie but as a real threat. A rider capable of breaking the eternal, of shattering the immortal. Sepang had spoken. The records were gone, and if this was only the beginning, what's to come in the first race of the season will be nothing short of explosive. The era of the V4 has arrived and the world is not prepared for the storm.